Well, I'm probably one of the offenders.
Why is big old computer?
I found the Surface is great, but unfortunately, I needed these.
I'd like to welcome everyone out to the regularly planned commission meeting for Thursday, October 21st, 2021. We'll start off with item 2.1, which will be the Pledge of Allegiance offered by Anthony Tusher. Hopefully I said that right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Anthony. We do have a full quorum today. Do we have any conflicts of interest with any of the items on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll proceed to item 2.4, which is approval of minutes for the July 1st, 2021 and September 16th, 2021 Planning Commission meetings.
I'll make a motion to approve item 2.4, approval of minutes for the July 1st and September 16th, 2021 Planning Commission meetings.
Motion made by Heather. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, guys. We'll move to item 3.1, which is administrative item. It's a request for approval of a conditional use for the Jackson Park, Teton Ranch Park, and Midas Creek Pavilion Park improvements. It looks like Clint will go over that with us.
Well, good evening. Always good to meet with the commission on these issues. So this first one is a conditional use, and this is largely for park amenities and design on these three parks that we'll be discussing. The applicant is the city. We've been working with Blue Line Designs, Rob Donegan. With them has been very helpful in creating the designs, and I'll probably turn some time over to him to go through some of the design aspects. This is the addresses and the zones that these parks fall in. We're looking at approximately 9.4 acres for all of them. They're all fairly close together, as you can see here. And clicker just died. There we go. And this highlights just those three park areas again. The Jackson Park being the largest, Teton Ranch just to the south of that, and then Midas Creek just south of the high school. Again, this is just another drawing of where those parks are located and kind of get a sense and feel for the size and location of them. So this is the Jackson Park layout, and you can see all the amenities that they're including. Multi-use field. We've got pickleball courts. I know that's been something that's been brought up several times. There's a pump track. There's 53 parking stalls here that is important to note. We'll talk about that in a little bit later. You can read through the list of amenities there. This is just to the south of that, the Teton Ranch. So there's trail, benches, swings, open lawn area, and a pavilion with a fireplace. And then this is the Midas Creek Park with the amenities shown there. This image here just kind of gives you a representation of the types of structures in terms of quality and feel, what they will look like as they're constructed there. It's not an exact depiction of what will take place, but just some representation of the types of architectural elements and designs that are being proposed for those three park areas. We can come back to this if you would like to. In terms of conditional use, basically how does this fit in with the community, and what kinds of impacts does it have for the community? With parks, there's not going to be a whole lot of concerns in terms of how does it fit in. It seems like whenever there's a vacant lot, somebody just wants to put a park in it. So I think that the neighborhood will be very welcoming of these parks and the amenities that are being proposed. As part of the master plan, there are requirements for parks given a certain acreage. All of these parks do meet those minimum requirements, and they probably exceed them a little bit as well. You can see the requirements on the left-hand side, and then the amenities in the green, fulfilling those requirements. Teton Ranch and Midas Creek as well. So there was one topic of discussion just regarding the Jackson Park. Currently, it's providing 53 stalls, and the field that is there is currently only being proposed for a practice field and not for active games. And that is just based off of the problems that games can bring, right? So if you have a field that there's lots of games, it brings lots of traffic, which is undesirable for the neighborhood. So currently it's being programmed as just or being proposed as just a practice field. This parking analysis down below shows that with that transition, you're going to need a total of 96 stalls. So from one game transitioning to another, during that time of transition, you'll need 96 total stalls. Once the game is over, or once that transition is over, you only need 57 stalls, and they're providing 53. So that puts 4 cars, potentially out on the street. So with that being taken into consideration, let's see. So these are some of the conditions that staff is proposing to allow for that team play, because we know that there's a need for that in the city, but then trying to mitigate that, that higher demand of parking needs. So we would recommend that during, the games can be played, so that you could have that 57 parking stalls that would be necessary. And then between games, there would be a 2-hour transition time. So you don't get that 96 cars showing up at the same time and needing a parking spot. So if you have that 2-hour transition, that kind of reduces that and helps the park to accommodate the necessary parking.
Can we have 2 teams?
What's that?
I'm just
That's what I'm saying,
joking.
exceeding one.
Exceeding 1 team, 2 teams?
Yeah.
We'll have a minimum of 2 hours.
Yeah, so if you have two
More than one
teams, then you have a 2-hour transition
Got it.
between games. And I'm seeing Lauren over there having all kinds of issues
You have
with
2
that. it looks
teams practicing against other people.
like. So with that being said, staff does recommend approval of the conditional use for the park amenities with these conditions listed here. So are there any questions, or you'd probably like to hear from our consultant here regarding the parks as well? So.
Good evening. My name's Rob Donegan. I'm a landscape architect and planner with Blue Line Designs, and I've had the privilege to work with city staff on coming up with these conceptual designs for the 3 parks that were just presented. And I don't know that I have anything else to add unless you have any questions or have any specific, or want to know more specifics about any of the parks.
I only have one question. As I can see Jackson Park is there across the Midas Creek. There's Teton Ranch Park. Is there going to be a bridge located there?
Yes.
I don't think I saw that or
And
not.
I don't know let's see if I can work this magic here.
Maybe I missed that.
Okay, so here you can see the relationship between Jackson Park, the larger park on the north side of Midas Creek, and then Teton Ranch Park on the south side. Essentially, and does this thing have a pointer on it? Touch my screen, wow.
There's a little
Oh. Oh,
It looks like the crossing's
I
over
can see
here,
it,
but then it gets
why
onto the
doesn't it show
trail
up on there?
that then feeds it.
Destiny, can you
But I
turn
might have
that?
to turn it on.
It's hard to only see it, Rick, like practice only.
Anyway, essentially, the short answer is yes, there will be a pedestrian bridge connecting Jackson Park across Midas Creek to the trail system on the south side that would connect to Teton Ranch Park.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in your packet on 195, there you go. There it is right there. So it doesn't connect directly with it, but it connects to the trail
Oh,
that
it's-
goes to it.
Yeah, so.
Right,
in
so
this
there is a
case-
connection.
Yeah, in this case, on Midas Creek, we actually have a trail on the north side which is obviously the southern boundary of Jackson Park. And then we also have a double trail on the south side that's doubled with an equestrian trail that runs right by Teton Ranch Park. And so the bridge will connect those two trails, thereby connecting the two parks together.
Just wish we could get
Since this is the only bridge I know in this area, unless you get up to the road, that's connecting the park with neighborhoods, things like that, and the trail, how wide is that bridge going to be?
We haven't gotten to that level of design yet. Typically, those bridges are 12 feet wide, but
Sorry, Rob. Is it okay if I make just one quick clarification
Yes.
there? Is I do believe that at least the scope of work that the city is planning on doing, although the trail and the bridge are all part of this overall picture, is currently not in the scope of the city's work, and we're anticipating the developer provide those improvements. So they would kind of go in parallel, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So to Rob's point, we don't know all the exact answers to that, but
But the width, do you know the answer to the width?
He said 12 feet.
12
Is
feet.
what he believes it was.
Okay.
well, that's a typical width for a pedestrian bridge like that.
So
Yeah.
standard.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 to 12 feet wide.
So you're not looking at anything wider, just a standard, right?
No, yeah, just a standard pedestrian bridge.
Okay.
Yeah. Sort of hoping something a little bit bigger if that's the only connection, and there's the pump track, and then there's going to be pedestrians and runners and everything else. So, but you guys know that better than I do. So, all right, that was the only question I had. If there's other questions from the planning commission.
Just the 2-hour gap didn't seem, I don't know how we enforce that. Like, how are we dealing with people scheduling the field and?
So Anthony Tusher, Deputy Director of Parks and Rec. So we utilize a system called Civic Rec for all our reservations,
Yeah.
and we would just program that into the system. So on this park, if anybody wanted to reserve it, it would either have a note there stating that it requires 2 hours between reservations, or we would establish a schedule that would start, I don't know, say at 4 o'clock, and then have blocks, maybe 2-hour blocks with a 2-hour gap, something like that. So we would utilize Civic Rec,
Okay.
our software that we're utilizing currently.
Yeah, to me, I don't
establish
know,
that.
30 minutes seems adequate.
And where'd you come,
And
where'd
that
the
was a
2 hours
question that
come,
I
yeah, where'd the
had.
2 hours come from? That's why I'm wondering your,
Again, that was, I'm not exactly sure on that. I believe that maybe Sheldon, I think that was the number Sheldon pulled out. I suggested maybe an hour, and
I
if you
think an
guys are
hour
okay
is-
with that, we would.
I think even 30 minutes might
would-
work.
30 minutes, I
See,
don't-
I think a 30-minute, you might have a little more overlap.
Overlap,
you
but-
and you get a comp
Teams
team that
usually
plays
show
there,
up
they're gonna
about
show
a
up
half hour
at
early.
least to
Teams
warm up.
linger, so I think if you had an hour gap in there, that'd be sufficient.
Can I ask a question between you and Lawrence? So, because I'm looking at soccer, let's say they have soccer games scheduled or whatever they're doing, or use of the field. Do they start practicing or doing stuff at 4 o'clock, at 5 o'clock? Because when does it become to where, I assume there's no lights that are scheduled for this field, are there? Yeah, and so we have limitations on lighting on the field, and so when would the blocks be okay?
I mean, weeknights, you're gonna get one game. I mean, really, realistically, I think weeknights, you'll only get one game. It's the Saturdays where you can get a few
Multiple
games backed
games.
up. But, and I think an hour is good, because like I said, you'll tell teams 30 to 45 minutes come for warm-up, sometimes even an hour, unfortunately, but I think I don't think if
So
we
you'll
told
probably
that-
have max of one game a night, and then
yeah,
on
we-
Saturday you have
Summertimes, you could
multiple.
probably get more. You could
Summer, you
probably
might be able
get
to do a
2 in.
4 and a 7,
Right.
because they can play till 9. You can play till 9, because you can
Okay.
get,
Yeah, I was just trying to think if logistically it made sense where you would get 2 games at
you
least.
do a 4 and a 7. I mean, I don't know how long rugby games are for, like soccer game, you assume 2 hours. Because it's 90 minutes plus halftime plus some breaks, so it's about 2 hours.
And you could have football schedule it and,
Football, sometimes they're only an hour. Sometimes they schedule their, when my boy started lacrosse too, they were stuck them to an hour. So if you had an hour between, you could get a 4 and a 6 and a 8, honestly, in the summer. So I think an hour between.
If
and
you
I
guys
think-
are okay with an hour in between, we would.
yeah,
support that as
I
well.
think that could be a recommendation from the planning commission in the motion.
So another thought on the recommendation of 2 hours, and we're fine with the 1 hour, whatever, parks would like, but another thought was just that would reduce the number of games played on a Saturday, so you don't get an overusage of the field that would cause, more impacts to the neighbors, so.
And this is going to be unique because I think any sports organization, you don't want negative publicity from neighbors if you're in a neighborhood. You really don't want, so you want to be good stewards of it. So I think an hour between is,
Yeah, I think we're okay.
'cause I think there's a buffer in there too. I think there is. I mean, most soccer games aren't going to last a full 2 hours, but I think if you allowed in the scheduling system to, soccer games 2 hours.
We just got to
But
make
then
sure
it's an
this is
hour.
built quickly, so it's more or less grandfathered in while the houses are there, and that's all they ever know.
Right.
That's true.
So I just
Yeah,
want to hear
we'd
from
support anything
Parks.
that the planning commission recommends on this, though.
Yeah.
Just want to hear from Parks, then your experience, an hour is adequate and it's not going to put too much wear and tear on the facilities?
No, I think an hour, you may get an extra game in there on a Saturday or two, but I don't think that's going to be detrimental to the fields or the facilities at all.
We want people to use this. We don't want to restrict it, so I like the idea of an hour in between. Do we do this with anything else?
Not necessarily with our sports fields, no, we haven't. I don't know that we've been faced with parking issues or, this is a similar parking situation.
So does Tuscany, the parks in Tuscany, get pretty high usage?
Yeah.
And have you had any complaints or problems with those? Because they have a lot less parking, and they have, 2 softball fields
2 softball fields and there's a soccer.
and a
field area in
basketball.
there, basketball
and-
court,
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any complaints from the residents.
I talked to Jonathan, there is one, there's that parking lot literally from that baseball field. They won't even park in the parking lot.
No,
They
it's
literally
pretty
do not.
far.
They park on the road right next to.
Do
the
they get
baseball field
complaints
there.
about that?
What's that?
Do they get complaints?
Yeah, Jonathan,
sometimes,
we've looked at it,
occasionally?
and this traffic team looked at it, and
Yeah.
they feel like it's wide enough, but they.
Well, the only reason why I ask is,
closest.
my curiosity is, do we need an hour restriction between games? Or how do we do it?
Yeah, is it something that we could
That's
add
what
later
I'm asking.
if
Do we
it is
need
a
that much of
problem?
a restriction, or do we say 30 minutes and that's it?
I
And allow,
I personally think you need an hour, because that's a little bit different situation over there, because they park there just because it's right by. Here,
Than it is to add.
hopefully they stay off
well, it
the
looks like
road.
there's more parking here, and that's why I was thinking.
I can see
there could be
them
less.
parking along the
road.
the roadway for the pickleball courts, just out of ease to get there. But even, the sidewalks into the parking lot too. The way it's designed, I don't think it's going to push people into the parking lots first. Where
I
in Tuscany,
agree.
there's a push to,
Parking lot's the closest.
yeah, the parking lot's the closest.
I
In
agree.
Tuscany, the road is the closest to some of those fields, not the parking lots.
I agree.
I think you need an hour. I would love to say back to back to back, but I think you got to be sensitive in a neighborhood like this.
Of course.
Well, that's the other thing. It's not just the parking, it's the traffic coming in. If you get too much, a couple more games, that's a lot more traffic.
And those
coming into
pickleball
those.
courts are going to be full from sun up to sundown. They will be full the day they.
And, I would be supportive of the hour if we find that, the traffic isn't what we originally thought it was going to be, or parking isn't quite the issue that we thought it was, or was going to be, then maybe we look at changing that
back,
down the road. For the time being, I think an hour
Let's start
is-
with an hour, see what happens, and then go from there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good with that. I'll let you guys have a seat.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other discussion with the planning commission, or are we ready to make a motion?
I think it looks great. I like it. I'm excited.
Remember, there was just the one potential recommendation of changing from 2 hours to 1. That would be the only change, I think,
So
that
right
we
now, there's
talked
the
about.
4 bullet points, right, on the recommendation? If you go, could you go to the recommendation page for us on here, please? Down a few slides. Right there, right? So then item 3 would
Item 3, yeah.
wouldn't have to change. Okay, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve item 3.1 with staff's 4 recommendations with a change to number 3 to allow all reservations exceeding 1 team shall have a minimum of 1 hour between games.
Did we want to add reservations exceeding 1 team or 2 teams? Like,
No, it's exceeding 1 team, so that's,
Games.
yeah.
So if it's exceeding 1 team, so it's 2 teams.
It's
Just
2
saying
teams,
if it's a
yeah.
game, yeah.
Motion made by Andy,
I'll second that.
second by Jackson. We'll call for a vote. Heather?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Brody?
yes.
Lauren?
Yes.
And Daryl?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Item 3.2, a request for approval of a subdivision amendment for the village at the Boulders, Phase 3. And we'll look at city staff for additional information.
Okay.
And this is on for a public hearing.
Yeah, this is a subdivision. It's a very simple one, though. It's something that will happen, and nobody will know the wiser except for the people that decide to buy the units here. So this is an existing subdivision just down kind of southwest of the Real Stadium there. This is where the development it currently is, and you can see where that letter A, the highlighted letter A is. That's the units that will be subdivided. This is what they look like, front and back. So there's an existing sixplex. Currently, it has 2 individual units that have been subdivided, and then the rest of the unit is combined into 1 unit, and there's 4 individual units in that one lot. So the applicant's just proposing to do the same thing that's been done with the other 2 and create individual units for those other 4 units that could be for resale. Obviously, like we said, nothing changes on the ground. Nobody will even know the wiser. And obviously, the concerns with water utilities are null because they're already being serviced. So this is the existing plat. Again, you can see the 2 units that have already been platted off and subdivided. So that is what will occur for the additional 4 units. Those units C, D, E, and F that is shown here on the plat. Those will all become individual units that will be available for resale and ownership. This is the proposed plat here. In terms of ordinance requirements, there's not a whole lot for us to look at as in this consideration. There are already existing buildings. The main consideration would be just making sure that the buildings have been constructed to be subdivided with those property lines in them, which our building department has looked at. And we recommend approval for the proposed subdivision to and create those 4 individual units. Any questions on that one?
No, thank you. Is the applicant here? Any additional information they would like to share? I'm guessing that's a no. All right, then we will open the public hearing at this time. That's what I was thinking. And we'll close the public hearing at this time and turn to the Planning Commission for additional discussion or a motion to be made.
I'll make a motion to approve item 3.2, request approval of a subdivision amendment for the Village at the Boulders, Phase 3 at 14881 through 14889 South Marble Rock Way in the RM zone.
Thank you, Heather. Motion made by Heather.
I'll second.
Second by Lauren. We'll call for a vote. Heather?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Lauren?
Yes.
Brody?
Yes.
Daryl?
Yes.
Thank you, guys. We'll move on to item 3.3, which is a consideration of a modified roadway cross-section for Springbok Drive. We'll turn to city staff.
Alrighty. In a really weird way, I'm kind of excited to be here right now and talk about this. Is the first time under the new standard that we have that we adopted back in June. It says in there that any modifications to the roadway require recommendation from the Planning Commission and approval from City Council. So this is our first one. Alrighty. So here at the tip top of Herman City at the intersection of Freedom and Anthem, we've currently received, and it's under review, and it will come to you once it's ready, essentially, for your review. But an item that we want to get through is obviously the improvement along Springbok Drive. And so they've, of course, come with a land use application, and they currently are proposing 2 locations for access. One, as you can see, is off Springbok Drive, which is the yellow corridor at top, and then a shared access that is off of Anthem Park Boulevard. That Springbok Drive currently serves one property owner, one community essentially, and that's the Timbergate community. And it's installed, it's kind of hard to see, but you can there's a bold line that kind of outlines the properties for this parcel. And Springbok Drive goes through the applicant's property. And it's put onto what we're calling the 50-foot wide access corridor, which is essentially memorialized in this plat here. It was lot split, and so as part of that, they reflected as 50-foot public access. On the books, we have not been able to find a formal easement outside of this. This is the most formal document that we have that shows this public access. But otherwise, this is what that roadway is built on. And it is improved on the north side, as you can see, on that Timbergate community. On the south side, it is not improved. And so the engineering required as part of the application improvements along the south side according to the standard roadway cross-section. The reason for that is on the top here, City Code says that, you know, that they'd be required to improve it and dedicate it. But of course, if it's not rationally related to the development, they would not have to complete, nor a fee in lieu would be necessary. Right now, as the application stands, it does have an access onto Springbok, so our opinion is that improvements would therefore be required. Also, in the city standard, it states that, well, we just talked about it, right? Which is any modification to roadway cross sections, we come to the Planning Commission for recommendation and City Council for approval. Just quick item to note here, you can kind of see in the aerial, I superimposed that plat over the aerial, and you can kind of see that the improvements for some reason were shifted 5 feet south. And it would have been nice to have those right up against that corridor edge to kind of give us a little more real estate there, but that's how it was installed. Moving on, so when we made this recommendation, well, even prior to the recommendation, they showed the improvements of what you see right here, which is 11 feet to 13 feet driver lanes on each side. So on your left is actually the Timbergate community, which is the improved side where you have the park strip and the sidewalk. And then on to the right side is the applicant's side, which would include sidewalk right up against the curb and gutter. So that was the option proposed for us for our review. The second option is that they would remove that access off of Springbok Drive, thereby limiting it to some extent our ability to require the improvements on that south side, or at least removing their access into that, and it would only be through Freedom. So those are the options that are before the engineering department right now. So then when those options were brought to us, again, the two things we look at, the first is level of service, or essentially, does it meet the baseline requirements from a traffic standpoint, and then does it meet health, life, and safety? And we lean on UFA quite a bit for that, so, or the Unified Fire Authority. So just kind of zoning in a little bit on the level of service, just really quick, that we're looking at that blue shaded area is another application that's currently under our review. And it's a residential community, and that's pending. It's not approved, obviously. And so to be conservative, we assume that would be approved. And so obviously the traffic counts would be up and they would be using Springbok Drive. There's a portion of the Timbergate community that would utilize Springbok Drive as well, obviously, as the dental office. So as we quantified that, we come up with an estimate about 1,000 vehicles per day, whereas the capacity would be somewhere around 5,000. And so we obviously anticipate that the anticipated level of service would be above level of service D, which is required. And then again, UFA's requirements currently require no parking on one side of the road for a section like this. So we would obviously make that a condition of their approval if this were recommended. Again, this is just a quick note that we want to make. Again, we have the application that's coming in, the property owner to the west. They will be in a similar situation, and we just wanted the commission to recognize it may have implications to that application, to what is memorialized on this decision, or here, as well as City Council for this particular one. I just wanted to bring that to light as we're thinking through this a little bit.
Any questions, thoughts, or is there
Sorry,
more?
We've essentially got to the end of it here. Again, the option one is what they've proposed. Option two is you don't recommend, or you obviously approve or you recommend it, or you don't recommend it, essentially is what we're saying here. From the engineering department standpoint, it meets level of service requirements as well as UFA requirements if the no parking signs were placed. So from an engineering standpoint, we're amenable to this. We would recommend this, but of course, this now comes to Planning Commission and City Council.
So I have a question on the 5-foot walk right next to the curb and gutter. It'll be, right? A lot of times we want to have a little bit wider of a sidewalk when you don't have the park strip. And personally, I think I would rather have an extra foot on that sidewalk and take a foot out of the travel lanes.
Say that again, 1
I
foot
would,
out of the,
1 foot, well, you'd have to take it out of the travel lanes
right.
if you added the 6
Reduce that
foot
a
there.
little
But
bit.
I would, personally, I would recommend the 6-foot sidewalk when you don't have that park strip.
Oh, got it, okay.
So that you'd have to take a foot out of the travel lanes to accommodate that, but I don't think that's a problem.
Okay.
Personally, but
Yeah.
that would be a suggestion on my part.
That's a good compromise.
Well, I have a couple questions. Can we go back to the main picture? So typically, we require a precast wall between commercial and residential. Is that the plans on this one?
Clint, would you mind speaking to that a little bit for me? Sorry, I caught you flat-footed, didn't I?
Typically,
I did that on
we
purpose.
require a precast wall between commercial and
So
residential.
the residential would have to put in a wall
So,
of the perimeter of the blue.
so that's typically what occurs.
Yeah, that is typically what occurs. In this instance, we have suggested that maybe a variance would be appropriate, and that would be, so a variance to not require the masonry wall between these two uses, just because between those two uses, if the dental office occupied the yellow space there, then you've got a street, a large parking lot, and then you get to the residential neighborhood. So it kind of provides a little bit more, well, there's obvious buffering there that would not typically exist. For example, when you have, if that were a single-family home is right behind it, then obviously we would want that.
But we'd require it around the purple, blue, whatever.
If that were a commercial use, then yes, we'd require it between.
And the reason why I'm asking is, I'm very aware if this is commercial and the dental office is on the corner, and this is a huge area for the kids to cut through. So without a wall, you will continue to have the kids cutting through their parking lots. And so, I mean, when they're walking to school at the middle school, I mean, kids are cutting across this field every day. And so I'm not sure if we want to not have that barrier, because then we force them to go on the sidewalk. I mean, you'll still have them potentially cut through on the one side, but there's at least a barrier from them cutting through the commercial entity parking lot and everything else, because it will occur. And so there may be some limitations or ways to limit that if we do have something separating it. So that was my one thought. And then the other question I have is on Springbok Drive. Do we have a right turn only out of this?
Nope.
In and out onto Freedom.
Yes.
Currently, no.
Would that be something that would be recommended by engineering or needed once we get an increase in the traffic?
Maybe if I could step back, Chris, just a little thought is, as I was talking with Public Works about this, is one item that we have not discussed with the applicant, but rather as it goes through, so there's that teeny piece, that triangle piece that's not shaded, is Harriman City property. And so rather there's a little more flexibility in the width that could be achieved.
Widen it?
And so you could, if necessary and necessitated, that we could have that flexibility to achieve that. That we wouldn't be so constrained, right?
Yeah.
So you could have a separate right,
Correct,
left
if
lane
necessary.
at that point.
Yeah.
I would say I haven't,
This is just a tricky intersection
Yeah.
area with traffic coming onto Freedom and then the turn coming off, because there's no light to dictate it.
Yet.
So people are turning and everything else pretty freely and quickly. I've seen 2 accidents there in the last
Yeah.
week almost.
It's wired, ready to go.
So it's just
gotta put in some
and you got
foundation.
high school
Yeah.
kids that use it, and
we don't have intersections otherwise. That's just how it goes in Harriman City, it seems, doesn't
I
it?
know. I just am curious I was curious with that. And then also, I mean, the other concern I had is if we did require a precast wall, obviously it'd be on the south side, but then how would that look when we go over to the north side across the purple property? And so
That's all
I worry about
residential.
how that looks
It's all
as
residential,
well.
though. You wouldn't
Chris, I'm pretty sure we addressed that when we were originally looking at this. We've had this
Flipping it.
discussion about the fence, and I want to say included that in our motion. So I wonder if that's something that we want to look back on,
Yeah.
or if this is just
To
totally
include a fence there?
I think that we were considering that there were going to be kids coming from the apartments to the school, and we wanted
I mean,
it
they've literally
to-
peeled because there's just a regular fence right now, and
Yeah.
they've opened it up to cut through.
We had discussed
On the
making
purple
sure that
property, the
that was
kids.
going to be
That's how much
open,
it's
and there was
used.
connection for the kids.
They're gonna run through there anyways with
But
the two
it's-
access
it's-
points. I just,
That's what I don't see
I
the
don't
need
like a
for
wall.
it.
I think while there is safety concern, I think that's with the view already and the accidents there, I think you're creating a safety hazard there with the precast. I don't think it fits there.
Well, and it's residential
road.
against residential. You don't need the wall there.
No,
By
that's
code, it
dental,
doesn't.
like with, I feel like.
Well, you're talking
with-
about the purple. That's right.
Well, so couple comments while I got the floor here. So the north-south line, yeah, of course you would need a wall along that. You got the little flag, the little stem that comes off. What's the width of that area? Are you going to be able to provide full width then through that? Or are you looking to match the?
I've been calling it the throat, and maybe we're
Yeah.
talking the same thing. Is it okay
Yeah.
if so the 46.27 right there?
Yeah, there you
So,
go.
yeah, so 46.27 obviously is a little shy of the 53-foot cross-section, but rather what they're proposing would fit, if that's what you're asking, Andy.
But it wouldn't be this modified cross-section you're looking at here.
The modified, so
What you're proposing for the typical section through this reach here, would that continue to the west? Maybe that's the question.
it could,
Gotcha.
if they have not.
Could, but I
this
would like to
applicant-
see only this little piece that's the issue. I'd like to have the park strip, sidewalk, further to the west. I
Yeah.
mean, this area is unfortunate that it's
Yeah.
the way it is, but as you go further west, why not get it to the 53?
Certainly,
Yeah, standard cross-section.
yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with that. That access number 2, I think somebody referred to this as a kind of a wanky road to begin with. Doesn't that create another issue with that access number 2 coming into the north-south part of Springbok and then it continuing west? Does it create any safety concerns of the traffic, a car coming south on Springbok and trying to turn into that parking lot? It's kind of going kitty corner across the
Do
road.
I have animation here? I do, don't I? So I'll just make sure I answer a question hoping I didn't mess this up. So you're talking about coming this way? No?
If you go back to one of your
back, yeah.
first presentations, maybe that shows the two accesses.
Oh, yeah.
They're not
Yeah,
directly,
load with the
they're
two
not directly
axes.
across
Yeah,
from
go
each
back
other.
a little bit, a few more.
Oh, 'cause it doesn't line up.
Yeah, they don't line up. The two,
Yeah, they
One
don't-
more,
they
right
don't-
there.
This works. Okay, so you're coming south on Springbok, and you want to turn into access number 2. You're kind of scooting across that intersection. It's
goes
probably not
into
the best thing.
The offset between the drive approaches,
Yeah.
is that what
But
you're worried
the
about?
fire said
Yeah.
I mean, I know usually you need the 2 accesses. To me, you would still want to, but it just puts it in an awkward spot.
And to your point, and I would maybe qualify the current situation we're at now is we're at conceptual level only, right? But I think that there could be an opportunity to look at that if necessary if that second access was needed or necessary, we could make a modification there to have it line up if that was, yeah, exactly.
Slide
Yep.
it west. The other
Correct.
question I have, and maybe it's not necessarily applicable to this particular development, but as residential's coming in, is one access enough for all those homes?
Oh,
From
for the one to the
Springbok.
west?
Yeah.
Yeah, again,
So maybe that's not for this.
they have just
here, but
recently
allowed
submitted that
30
application.
units
30
one
units with
access.
one access, okay.
With fire. One thought that I also have is if we're potentially not looking at wanting or desiring the precast wall, actually recommending to this landowner that they're required to pay for the extra turn lane on Springbok out. Because we're taking away their need to put a precast wall in, and that way we sort of are able to offset some of what we do. We give a little and we get in return what we think we may need, but we're not positive yet.
But I guess it depends on who's coming in first as to
Yeah.
who is required to put in the wall.
How does that variance work? Maybe Clint, you can speak to that. I don't know if that's a condition that you can do for something that comes in the future.
I'm not sure that, as part of a variance, it'd just be asking for that. So that's, there's not a provision in the ordinance that allows the commission to waive the need for a fence, which is why they would go through a variance process where they're in a unique situation that is not typical of other commercial lots and, you know, in the same, in a typical configuration. So the variance would just apply to the fence issue. I don't think that in a variance you could say, well, we're going to waive the fence, but still require you to put in, I think that at that point, you're just looking at that strict component.
You can't technically reallocate
Right.
to where we'll say, okay, we'll allow a variance here. We can't do that, okay.
So you're saying right now, the requirement would be they would have to have a fence along Springbok or along this whole
Yeah,
reach here.
technically the requirement is
Technically, they're supposed to,
between,
because of the
between
residential on the
commercial and
other side.
residential, they're required a precast wall.
Are they required even with a roadway in there? I thought that was kind of an.
They dedicate that, that's no longer adjacent to a residential
Right.
property.
Yeah,
Okay.
So then we don't have to require.
yeah.
Along Springbok.
That,
But they would be adjacent to resident, is the.
Nope.
Yeah.
there's
No, because there's a
Yeah.
commercial in between
You're
them.
Well,
there's no-
there is going to be commercial and residential coming in potentially with
the
the
next
purple
one
that will be
is-
required, the wall on the east-west,
the
east
next
or
one is
west side.
commercial.
No, the next
Just
one's
west of
commercial.
here is commercial.
Yeah, right here's commercial, and then we have the
Residential over.
It'll be way back, though. It won't be adjacent to this lot at all.
So if Springbok
not.
continues west,
That lot is commercial.
There you go.
Yes. Oh, no, excuse me.
It'll be
Currently,
right there. Cool.
right now, that is owned by the church and,
No. So the church owns the flag lot kind of piece.
oh, I'm sorry. You are right. That is commercial, Chase.
That's White, is it Whitehaven Dental?
Yes,
Something like
that's
that?
White Pine.
White Pine, there you go.
Yep, so that's White Pine. So you're right. That is commercial. The one that's potentially could be residential is the one to the west.
So
This
they
one.
wouldn't need a wall except for the north-south, the vertical line.
This one.
Yeah.
The horizontal,
That'd be
they
the only
don't,
one.
that's a road there as well.
Oh,
That's
you're
Springbok.
talking about this line.
I'm not seeing
Well,
it,
that's,
sorry.
that little flat
this
part's gonna
property-
be, that's gonna be a road.
This property doesn't need a fence anywhere.
Yeah, there's no.
No, this one
there's
doesn't.
no
There's no need
residential.
for a fence
Okay.
anywhere on this until the residential comes in, and then,
That's the other
And
property. That's the
so
other
again, the
dentist.
property,
be a
the applicant that we're speaking of is
Yeah.
here, right?
right, there's no
And,
requirement.
and
for
this
a
one
fence
over
requirement.
here is the one you're speaking of that's
I don't like having a fence.
maybe
around
not
anywhere.
necessarily,
I don't
it's
like a fence
adjacent
there
right here.
at all.
There's no need.
Yeah, but you're gonna have there's
A
no,
road.
there's no requirement for
Right.
for a wall.
I think it looks silly with a wall, to be honest, so.
Yeah. I'm okay with the wall going on that vertical.
I feel like it needs to have, if we're going to allow them to take a left out of there, I think it needs to have 2 turn lanes.
Right here.
But Andy, we
do.
can't require it.
his to see where he's highlighting.
We can't require it on the vertical, though. Because that's.
Not
commercial.
now, no.
No, we
Not until
can't.
that's, and it's a
We
chicken
can,
and
I'm
egg.
just saying,
Who's
I think
first?
it's going to be required,
That's
it's going to be
residential to
needed.
the next property. That's not this.
That's
one.
right. So
Yep.
who's required to put in the wall? Is it the residential when it comes in, or is it the commercial?
The residential will,
It's the second.
because they're the second one in.
The second one in would have to.
Yep.
Exactly. So that, at that point, they're required to do it.
That's that tangent we talked about. that Chris
Yeah.
asked us not to.
It's all.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not ideal, but I think it's, given the circumstances, I think it's,
And I want the second access, to be quite honest. I don't want to.
I believe the second access is necessary.
I agree.
My only concern is going to be the turn lane out of there. That's the only thing I worry about, which it sounds like that's going to fall on the city.
And Chris, just to be, I apologize, just to be clear, you're talking about the spot that I'm putting my finger on right now, right?
Queen Freedom, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my biggest concern is I think you have to have a right turn and and if you don't, I think you have to require right turn only out of there. I don't think it's a good idea to go across that intersection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you have on the other side?
And you have smarter people than me that can look to see if they agree or don't agree though.
And that's my question. 1,000 vehicles a day is what you said.
Yeah.
I personally don't have a problem with a shared right and left
Yeah.
out of there. I don't think it's enough to worry about, especially on the other side.
I'm more worried about the cars going up and down Freedom
I get it.
with the
maybe
cars coming.
I get it, but
If it's helpful to state, I would say this, that we do have flexibility here, right, Chris? And
Yeah.
we would have that, and we could take a closer look at what would be necessary there. But yeah, to your point, we've got some flexibility on that area there as far as property is
so
concerned.
that driveway on the other side though, on the east side there,
You
of
talking
Freedom.
here?
Yeah. I mean, that's just there's no separate, it's just a single lane
Correct,
coming out as
right.
well.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I'm good with
Okay.
it.
So I think we all like the 6 foot on the south side, right?
I like the 6-foot sidewalk on the
Okay.
south side. What's your thoughts there? taking a foot out of the travel lanes to get you a little bit more, because
There's some flexibility with that, and I, to your point, whoa, I don't know where I'm going here, but right, I gave you some flexibility on those lanes, so we've got some.
yeah, you had 11 to whatever, and
Yeah.
even if those lanes go to 10.5, that's
Yep.
fine.
Remind me, there's a sidewalk on the north side?
Yes.
Correct, and a park strip.
Why would we have a sidewalk on the south side in this case?
Why do we not?
Why would we?
Why would we?
So you can get to the dental office.
And
Walkability.
service the people to the west.
Yeah.
The current site plan, I've been clicking through this presentation, so I apologize, and it's really slow, but it shows it on one of those. There's a sidewalk that actually follows along that south side and then connects into the dental office on one of those doors.
So this potentially, because, yeah, okay,
You need it. It's going to happen.
that's
Down
fine.
the road, I mean, and you gotta think down the road too, when we put the housing in down the road, you'll want a sidewalk on
Or
that side.
whatever.
Is it's gonna move
Well,
into
I
that.
don't think it's wide enough to potentially, we'll be able to have it on one side of the road only. Because that narrow strip is, it's not as wide.
Minimum you could have.
I foresee I will likely be coming to you guys again with that west piece.
Right.
Pretty soon, actually.
Yeah,
And we can,
I foresee that too.
yeah.
And I think we'll lean on you to tell us what's gonna be able to, because I think we want a conformity, that whole,
Yeah.
whatever's gonna be in that little narrow piece that's in, whatever. I don't think we want a sidewalk.
Remember how wide that narrow piece is?
46.27.
Yeah, the flag lot?
Look at that.
It's right,
Wow,
well,
that's
he
impressive.
read, it's on his,
But,
it's on the
Oh,
screen.
that's right.
but I would say this, they have sent us the application, of which I have not looked at in depth. I do know that there's gonna be a handful of requests for deviations to the standard, and I'm gonna need to come to the commission. We can take a closer look at the time.
Okay.
So there is,
And it looks like they could do it too, just like this, the sidewalk down with park strip. Because that's the same width right there.
there's no way to get 6 more feet on that south
Yeah,
side.
they can't get a park.
If you look at this, you'll see why.
On the north side, right?
So just by way of information, the White Pine
yeah.
Dental that was approved just adjacent to this one, they will be installing a precast concrete fence along the borders where they're adjacent to that residential.
The residential. Okay. I'm gonna,
Okay, any other discussion, questions?
Think so.
All right, I'll let you have a seat, I guess.
yeah.
And then turn it to the planning commission for discussion, or if ready for a motion.
I think I'm ready to make a motion. Make a motion for item 3.3, consideration of the modified roadway cross-section of Springbrook Drive along the Herman Dental Office project. Going with option 1 with a modification that we make the sidewalk on the south side 6 feet instead of 5.
I will second that.
All right, motion made by Brody, a second by Andy, and we'll call for a vote. Brody,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Lauren.
Yes.
That's how I wrote it down.
You're switching it up on us.
That was weird.
All right, guys. Any other remarks by the planning commission that needs to be discussed? All right, future meetings. Wednesday, October 27th will be city council meeting. Thursday, November 4th, planning commission meeting. Wednesday, November 10th, city council meeting. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Brody, motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much.
It's not even 8 o'clock, guys.
November, yes, I will be here.
You haven't had one this short in some time.
I know.